So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the NMEP webinar in collaboration with Art First. I'm Bharti Thakur, founder and CEO of NMEP, and I'm totally amped, excited, and thrilled to be here with some of the most forward-thinking change makers, and I'm delighted to welcome our wonderful attendees and Zoom bombers on our worldwide webinar. Well, here we are, and unfortunately, we can't meet in person. And as you sit here today, or stand, or recline, or microwave a samosa, I hope you gain many insights from what I'm sure is going to be a lively and enlightening conversation. Today, I couldn't be more excited because I'm here with some of the brightest minds in education and art. And there are three themes we're going to discuss in this panel discussion titled Developing Creative Intelligence, CQ, the essence of student future readiness. One, why has creativity become so extraordinarily important? Two, why is there this gap between the skills children are learning and the skills they need for the future? And what are some of the new approaches schools and leaderships need to bring in? The COVID-19 lockdown has upended no part of our lives more than in K through 12 education. And this might be just the disruption that the sector needed to get us all to rethink how we educate and question what we need to teach and what we are preparing our students for. We don't have a clue what the world is going to look like in 5 years. How on earth are we going to educate them for it? So what we do know is that all children are inherently creative, curious, innovative, and unfortunately, our education system is killing their organic inborn creativity. So there's this fascinating study done by NASA scientists, actually, where they studied 1,600 young people and then followed them from the time they were 4 or 5 to the time they were adults. And at 4 and 5, they scored 98% on what is called the genius category of imagination. And by the time they reached adulthood, to 2%. So what we know is that creativity, unfortunately, atrophies as we grow. And that is such a, that's such a pity. So my contention here is that we are squandering the amazing natural talents children are born with, and their creativity is dormant. We need to create the right conditions for each child's unique creative intelligence to thrive. And when I was little, actually I'm still little, I wasn't liked very much by my teachers. I was a mediocre student and I asked too many questions, which they termed talking back. And almost all children are inherently curious and often shamed into silence with silly adages such as curiosity kills the cat. And when I think about it, this inborn curiosity has served me much more than the content I learned in school. Look at me, I'm here chairing this panel discussion and asking you all questions. So, I laugh about it now, though in retrospect, I do think this environment of forcing children to fit a certain mold certainly did damage my self-esteem, risk-taking abilities, and kind of created a feeling of inadequacy because the teachers and the system did not accept, nurture, and create a safe space for me to be my authentic self. And this straitjacketing of inherently unique individuals sucks out your confidence, divergent thinking, and your happiness. In Parthasarthi's Vedanta treatise, he writes, acquisition of knowledge is not mere cramming of information from external sources. Few realize that true education springs from oneself. The word educate means to draw out, and knowledge has to be drawn out from you, not pushed in. So without further ado, let me introduce our wonderful array of panelists. I'm going to start off with Radhika Bharatram. Radhika is the joint vice chairperson of the Sri Ram schools. She has also been instrumental in setting up the Sri Ram Millennium schools in NCR. With a keen interest in arts, she served as the honorary general secretary of the Delhi Crafts Council and has varied interests in music, pottery, and running. Anita Dubey. Anita is one of the most creative and challenging artists in India today. Anita's works have been part of all the important exhibitions of contemporary art from India in the last decade. These include the Indian Summer at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, India Moderna at the Institute of Modern Art in Spain, among many others. And her works are in the collection of the Tate Modern as well. Anita was also the first female curator of the Kochi Biennale in 2018. Welcome, Anita. We're really excited to have you with us. Roshan Gandhi has a big responsibility on his young shoulders. He is the CEO of City Montessori Schools, Lucknow, the world's largest city school with 57,000 students. An alumnus of Oxford University with an MBA in Education Leadership from UCL, Roshan leads transformation across the CMS schools. And next up, we have Manit Jain. Manit is the co-founder of the Heritage Group of Schools. He has championed the cause of experiential learning, launching it successfully in the mainstream environment. He co-chairs FICCI's school education arm and has earned a master's degree in education from Harvard University. Welcome. Brian Cooklin. Brian is an international educational leader, having led schools across 3 continents over 23 years. As managing director for Nord Anglia in India, Brian will lead the group's strategic development and support the leadership teams of all 5 Oak Ridge International Schools, which are part of the Nord Anglia group. Nord Anglia is the world's leading premium schools organization with 69 schools in 29 countries. And it gives me great pleasure to introduce Rifka Sadarangani. Rifka is the COO of Art First, a graduate in fine art, technology, and visual communication from the School of Art Institute of Chicago. Rifka has over 15 years of experience leading arts, culture, and media organizations in the US and India. At Art First, her focus is expansion, business development, communication, and digital innovation. And I'm Bharti Thakur. I'm a media and communications graduate of Denison University, USA. I founded NMEP about 3 years ago with the mission to start a dialogue that will move people to push for quality education. And this is why I love bringing progressive educators and change makers together to collaborate and ideate with. I'm also the India head of the prestigious Swiss boarding school, Collège du Léman in India. I'd now like to invite Rifka to tell us a little bit about Art First.
Great, thank you, Bharti, and a very warm welcome to everybody watching the webinar today. I'm very excited to be here. So Art First has been at the forefront of redefining art education in India since 2009. We have directly impacted over 40,000 students, over 1,000 art teachers, and curated over 120 child art exhibitions in 40 schools in 18 cities from all over India. We are artists, educators, educationists, pedagogues, writers, designers, thinkers, and our mission is to radically reimagine pedagogy, creativity, visual literacy, and redefine the role of art curriculum for the holistic growth of the child. At the core of our work are children, teachers, and schools. We empower educators to unlock children's potential by equipping them with the knowledge, skills, and resources to implement a vibrant arts education program that fosters original thought and imagination. We use the visual arts as a pedagogical tool, and our work is firmly rooted in the rich art and visual culture of India. How do we do all this? We do this work through our in-depth and comprehensive art education program, which has been developed for preschool, primary, and middle schools, both public and private. Our multi-year, multi-stage curriculum works with teachers and schools to develop and design curriculum that activates the critical and creative thinking abilities of students, while introducing them to the fundamentals of art and visual culture. We have recently launched our newest program, our year-long Art Integrated Learning program that works with art teachers and subject teachers to embed the art integration process in schools, which is the latest imperative from the National Education Policy. We also advocate for the importance of art education through our Pan-India roundtables, seminars, and art labs, and recently completed our first Art Education Summit in 2019 in collaboration with the CBSE and the IGNCA. And we connect educators to policymakers and generate conversations around the importance and essential need for art education in our schools and propose appropriate policy changes. Through our publishing arm, we introduce children to the exciting world of Indian visual art through our books series for all children from ages 4 up to 13 plus. And we also produce films that introduce global audiences to the lives and minds of Indian visual artists. All of this supports our larger goal to redefine art and art education in India. Our work has a proven track record with measurable changes for schools and children, and our work is based on research, intensive research and experience, and would be impossible without all our partners and collaborators who believe in these ideas as much as we do. Which brings us to today, and we are delighted to have this conversation with my fellow panelists. Over to you, Bharti.
Okay, great. So we're very much on time. So let's start this conversation. Our topic today is Developing Creative Intelligence CQ, the Essence of Future Readiness. So I'm going to start off with my first question, which is to Manit. In fact, Manit has written a really interesting book called Survival of the Humanist, which talks a lot about creative intelligence. So I'm going to direct this first question to you. So LinkedIn Learning has crunched data from their network of over 660 million professionals and 20 million jobs to reveal that the number one in-demand skill by companies was creativity. So it's no stretch to say that creativity is the single most important skill in the world for all business professionals today to master. Why has creativity become so important?
Sorry, I forgot to unmute. Thank you, Bharti, so much for having me here. And this indeed is one of my favorite topics to speak about. I'm reminded of this book by, it's a difficult to pronounce name, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. The fellow who wrote Flow and then Creativity, which is a brilliant book. And I think flow feeds into creativity. And he spoke about these two really interesting insights. The first one was that anything that is interesting, important, and distinctly human is a result of creativity. Chimpanzees are 98% us in terms of their genetic makeup. And what makes us different is that our language, our values, our artistic expression, our scientific understanding, and technology all are the result of individual ingenuity that was recognized, that was rewarded, and transmitted through learning. And the second reason why it's important is even more important is that when you're in a creative zone, you feel more alive. It's just so essential to be in that space. And compared to any other zone you may be in, when you're being creative, you feel a sense of energy, a sense of life that is difficult to find. And on this is more on the general level. If we talk about occupations, careers of the future, of course, we're sitting at an inflection point right now. With the fourth industrial revolution upon us, it's very, very clear that the physical, the biological, and digital, which is coming together in very profound ways, will have a very serious impact on how we live, how we work, how we relate. And all repetitive tasks will get outsourced to machines. And that would mean that people will have to get back to becoming more human. So we'll have to start a process of rehumanizing of education, because until now, what has happened in the name of education is preparation for repetitive tasks. The whole drill, the whole rote, the whole concept of one right answer, the whole preparation for examinations is kind of doing a repetitive task. And now, if we don't rehumanize education, then machines will take away a lot of these jobs. So research is indicating, what I think Oxford University ran this research way back in 2013, it's a phenomenal document. Also, the World Economic Forum in 2016 ran this research, and they spoke about two intelligences, essentially. One is social, and the other is creative. Social, more at the level of empathy, at the level of self-awareness, understanding oneself, understanding others, being able to respond to others' needs, the ability to persuade, to influence, to negotiate conflict, trustworthiness. Some of these qualities come under the category of social intelligence, and creative intelligence, of course, the ability to put disparate bits of information together to create a whole, to think originally. Original thinking is also one very big problem now, as you curiosity. Again, there's another study that I read of where they say kids until the age of 8 ask as many as 100 questions a day, and then it goes down to under 10. And I think there needs to be some kind of a mechanism to sustain that curiosity for the child. And actually, in COVID times, there's another intelligence that has become very important, and that is global intelligence. The kind of connections that we've seen people making in the last 6 months, really physical, geographical boundaries now have no meaning. Our lives have transformed significantly in just 6 months. And global intelligence, again, is talking about acceptance, about adaptability, adaptability in the sense that you have to forecast what is going to happen, you have to envision the future, and you have to respond to it flexibly and in time. Because the pace of change and the scale of change that we're seeing right now is absolutely unprecedented. So I'll stop here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But so if you were just to name like the top 3 skills and traits that would be required, you think, for future jobs, what would they be?
Empathy, curiosity, and critical thinking.
Okay, fine. So my next question is to Roshan. Roshan, you're a tech expert. You're an advisor to a number of ed tech companies. Do you think creativity is important for people in science and technology?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Bharti, for having me today. In answer to the question, is tech important in science and technology? Absolutely. I mean, for all the same reasons that Manit was sharing about the changing world and the uncertain scenario that we're moving into, creativity is probably the most important skill to have in any field. And that includes very much science and technology. And I think for years, not just in India, but around the world, the whole focus on science and tech has been developing the very specific hard skills of conducting particular types of science experiments and learning the background knowledge about science. And all of that is an important base for anyone to have, for sure. But ultimately, what's far more important is knowing what to scientifically investigate and why to scientifically investigate it, right? It's knowing what is important to study and how is it important to create new ways of going about studying it. So that's what the scientific field is all about. And the original purest form of scientific inquiry, the scientific method, was always about creativity. You have a hypothesis and you're supposed to find creative ways to prove or disprove that hypothesis. Now, that somehow got lost in the education system that is built up over time, but it needs to be regained. In tech specifically, it's absolutely vitally important to have creativity because well, what we're seeing now is that we've got armies and armies of people who are trained to code, who have the ability to write lines of tech code and computer programming, but they're not able to come up with new things to code or decide what is to be coded. And we've been seeing in the last few weeks very interesting backlash against this just starting. Certain ed tech companies have been doing marketing, which is all directed around trying to get kids to learn coding from a young age and just learn how to go through writing lines of code in a very rote manner. And they're really convincing people that that is what needs to happen for their child and that that is the most important thing for the development of their child at a young age. And what people have started to realize is that no, absolutely not. Learning to code can come anytime. It's actually really easy. Learning what to code, knowing how to come up with applications that are useful to people and how to solve problems while coding, that is what is important. And so in the tech field, creativity is probably the single most important skill as well to remain relevant in tech. So creativity is absolutely at the base of everything we do. And what I would say about creativity, I feel personally, is that it is an inherent trait in human beings. Humans are inherently creative. And so sometimes people ask the wrong question. People ask, what do schools need to be doing to foster more creativity? Actually, I think the right question to ask is, what do schools need to stop doing, which is killing creativity, right? So schools, ed tech companies, the whole work across the board needs to work out what they're doing wrong that is killing the natural creativity that is inherent in people, and what they need to do to stop that from happening. So that's a process that we are all, I think, embarking on a journey on. And I think COVID-19 has accelerated the start of that journey to some extent. So personally, I'm excited to be able to collaborate with so many educators in coming up with ways of thinking about that. But it's a journey that we all need to go on and experiment on together.
Great, thank you. That was really, really interesting and a great way to look at it. There's a lot of kind of confusion on this subject. So thanks for sharing that. My next question is to Rifka. So Ken Robinson, in his most watched TED talk ever on how schools kill creativity, which I'm sure everybody has seen, he says that there's this hierarchy of subjects around the world, with math and science at the top, social sciences in the middle, and the arts at the bottom of this hierarchy in schools around the world. So do you think that this hierarchy is now out of date? And today, and do the arts have an extremely important role to play to boost this creative intelligence that we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're missing the point by relegating arts to a hobby or an activity, or it needs to take center stage, in fact, in a lot of ways, and it can. I mean, if there was an interesting fact I was reading, that the top 10 jobs today in the world actually didn't exist 10 years ago. And actually 10 years from now, we actually have no idea what kind of new work there is going to be in the world. But beyond even kind of an economic imperative need for this idea, I think there's a very much human need for the importance of art and the role it has to play in creativity, of course. In another big, I know, we've been talking about 21st century learning skills a lot, but I think the conversation's already begun at 22nd century skills. I don't know if people have heard about this, which is care, culture, connection, and community. So it's like, while we're still kind of operating with what we need to do now, there are people who are also thinking of the future, which I think is really important. When Manthan was talking about caring and empathy, for us, the question is, okay, how? Okay, what is the how? And I think art and the processes embedded in art education and art integration learning can also kind of shift the needle on the how, because it's also a question, as Roshan was also kind of saying, piggybacking off that, is that what do we need to do, but what do we need to not do? We need to let go of this regimented thinking. We need to let go of this emphasis that there's only one way to learn, that there are we know this, there are multiple intelligences, there are multiple ways to absorb information. It's about nurturing and nourishing the curiosity, the open-mindedness, the creative thinking facilities of the child, and really creating, also empowering educators to do that. So it's not just a you or a me or a educational leadership question. It needs to permeate through every level of educational establishments, right, from leadership to teachers and also to parents. Parents also need to shift their thinking on what's important and how children's time should be spent. That time needs to be spent in play, time needs to be spent in experimentation, time needs to be spent in more open spaces for learning. And that requires taking risk, and that requires being okay with that on a lot of levels. So it's, I think, also being comfortable with all these ideas and all these thoughts. Yeah.
But what I want to just follow up with is that a lot of people think that these creativity and all of these things are nice to haves. But what I would like to kind of bring out for our audience here, that they are must haves and there's an economic imperative to it. So could you tell us a little bit about why it's a must have?
Okay, so creative thinking is a way of looking at problems and solutions from a fresh perspective, right? And it's about also creating your own body of knowledge. It's not just about learning facts. It's about creating your own and embodying your own knowledge in response to the world. And it's stimulated by unstructured processes and also by structured processes. So if we look at the situation we're all living in today, it's about our ability to unlearn, relearn, and kind of follow that cycle again and be comfortable with that process and be constantly and continuously engaged in the process. I think even we as adults are experiencing that. All of us know children in our lives who are experiencing that. So I think our lived experience at the moment is the best teacher into to realize the importance of the ideas in creative thinking and what creative thinking can do for us. So I hope that answers that question.
Okay. Yeah, we'll come back to it. All right. Anita, my next question is for you. And it kind of, I think, will also answer my question. But from an from an art historian to an artist to a writer and the first female curator of the Kochi Biennale, you've had a hugely successful career in art. And it takes a certain amount of courage to pursue art and the arts in general as a career for a young person, because there's this misleading advice that young people get, that when it comes to creating a career that will make you financially secure, what you need is math and science and tech. So could you share with us a little about your process of self-discovery, risk-taking ability that gave you the confidence to pursue art as a profession? You'd have to unmute yourself, Anita.
Hi, thank you, Bharti, and hello to all the audience. Look, actually, I'd like to, my thing is a test case, actually. So whatever you're talking about, because you can imagine, so I'm 62. So when I was young, I was primed. I was a good student. I topped, my school in UP, and my dad and everybody was pushing me to become a civil servant. So that's the high-end career that you could pursue at that time. And when I joined LSR, I realized that, I was studying history honors, but I was not really enjoying it. I mean, I was studying like, you're supposed to study. I was doing well, but I was not enjoying it. So we need to, when we are talking about creative thinking and creative, we have to understand that pleasure is an important element in the freeing of imagination, in the freeing of the mind, in the freeing of the whole thing, so that creative intelligence works. Otherwise, how does creative intelligence work? So one of the key things is that you have to understand that if you're not enjoying something, maybe one has to rethink. So I'm using myself as an example. And at the time that I was studying, I was writing some poetry, and I just had a curiosity, so I would go to art exhibitions and see work. Okay. My family background, everybody is a doctor, so there was nothing that actually primed me to do these things, but it's just curiosity. And by the time I passed out, I realized that, I was only drawn towards two things. One was poetry and one was art. Now, where's the civil service? I told my dad, no, I'm not. He said, no, you give the exam and then you don't join. And I said, Dad, that's a really, they trap you into this kind of thing. And I said, no, I will not give the exam. I'm going to join either Central University, Hyderabad, to study comparative literature, or I'm going to join MS University or Shantiniketan to study art history. So now you can see, even for me, the process was so long. From history, I could only move to art history, because at that time, nothing told me that I had, what it takes to be an artist. I couldn't take that plunge. So look at that, because nothing is actually encouraging you.
Yeah.
Do you understand that? And which is why when Mr. Manit was talking, I was happy that, if schools give children that opportunity to experiment with material, spend some time where you touch material, whether it's clay or paint, that's when you realize whether there's some connection with that activity and your whole, psychic and, being. which is actually something that is so close that you can't let go of it, So there's something about, it's about creativity in that sense. And it's difficult to discover what you feel is just right. You understand that? And and I think one of the keys to success or anything like that is when you do something and it's not like you have to labor enormously to do it. It comes fairly effortlessly because the imagination has been freed, and you're moving in, as somebody used that word, flow. Exactly. So flow is very important, because when there's flow, there's a certain amount of effortlessness, and you're able to take those jumps and risks, whatever we are calling risk. And so it's a kind of a leap in the dark, right? So all those things happen only when you have this kind of flow within the material that you want to encounter, or you're touching, or you've sensed it, or you're imagining, and you take that leap. So just to share that, so you know what I mean. So from there, art history, I joined art history, and it took me another, so I wrote some text as an art historian, but then there came a time when I started to touch material, okay, which means physical. So I'm a sculptor, so let's say it was cement and wood, and when that happened, I thought that, look, even art history is not enough. This is where I have to go. And actually, I'm a self-trained artist. I mean, I never studied painting, sculpture, any of these. Physically, I never studied. But that's the curious part of it. And then when you start actually working, you take that on, and you say that, look, I'm going to take that risk. I already have a degree in art history, so I can always practice writing or teaching. But this is what I'm feeling really connected with, and I have to take that risk. And so, it was very difficult. I must tell you that, it's not easy, because nobody is, even my parents said that, you've been just, you're doing this and then you're doing that. You're totally scared, And I said, no, Dad, there's something that's actually really pulling me to become an artist. So it's,
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that's inspiring for so many people. So yeah, I mean, like you're saying, there's this kind of, it's really sad that so many kind of very talented and brilliant and creative people are pursuing things like engineering and science, and sadly failing to succeed. And the world is now engulfed in this revolution, and the skills to succeed have changed dramatically. So it's really sad, actually, that the employability of Indian engineers today continues to be painfully low. The unemployability, over 80% of engineers are unemployable in any job in the knowledge economy. This is a well-known statistic. And our current education system has ensured that students are unemployable right now for the jobs of today. How is it going to prepare them for the jobs of the future? So, Radhika, this question is to you. What, in your view, are some of the reasons that there's this huge gap between, that exists between what kids are being taught in school and the skills that they need to thrive in the future?
Namaste, Bharti, and thank you for inviting me. And what a great panel, and lovely to hear all of you. And I will just build on everybody, because everybody has sort of answered what you've just asked me. And I just want to start by saying that there are no successful professions. There are only successful people. And as schools, we play a very important role in making sure that we have successful human beings. And the problem with the current curriculum or the system in schools is that our teachers, first of all, are not trained to impart the skills that our kids need to have. First of all, there's a big gap in the whole teacher training course that we have. And to add to that, our curriculum doesn't lend itself to creating creative kids who are going to take up skills or going to take up a creative option. But as schools who are progressive, who want to think differently, we play a very, very important role in changing that mindset. I can only talk about from our example, a school which was started 33 years ago. My mother-in-law was very clear that, you know, we are never going to call co-curricular activities as extra co-curricular activity. First of all, that was made very clear. And there was a curriculum that was started 33 years ago, which was an integrated learning approach. Okay, so I'm talking about when she was criticized for starting this school, which was out of the box, we made sure that there was constant dialogue happening between all the departments. So if we were going to do, say, numbers, the whole school, the whole art department, the field, everybody was talking. There was a theme-based learning concept in schools. And that led to creativity, that led to collaboration, that led to conversations between educators in our school to make sure that we were teaching all types of learners. See, when we were in school, you were just a learner. Now we have different sorts of learners, right? And now we're discovering that we have to cater to every type of need of every child. And thankfully, we have that curriculum at school. Our family has always been a great supporter of Indian craft, dance, music. And so in our school, we have constantly concerts. Okay, so we have Spikmeke coming in, we have craftsmen coming in and sitting. And I cannot tell you how much kids enjoy that. And I remember we have a loom. We have a loom in both our senior schools, and our kids actually make daris. They can actually work on a loom. And as a school, I feel we play such an important role in making sure that we provide a lot of freedom to our teachers to think differently, to teach differently, to make mistakes, but teach in a creative way. And I can give you many examples where we've had students, we were doing Macbeth, and we introduced Kathakali dance, which everybody knows, I think. And they did the play in Kathakali outfits, totally driven by kids. And that only happens when you create an environment where kids have freedom to think out of the box, and you have your teachers who are just facilitators. And, I think going forward, we can see that the NAP is talking about flexibility in senior school to choose between science and arts. We hope that it happens. There is talk about, in universities to have a 4-year liberal art course. I think those are all, steps towards making a very creative society. But as educators, as people who run schools, we always have the flexibility to change what happens in a classroom. I think Manit also knows that. His school does a fabulous job of it. And, we just need to make sure that that is happening. And I think we will create people who are happy. We will create individuals who will follow their heart. I remember I used to love music as a kid, and I lost that passion, that love for it, but I've gotten back to it. So coming back to that, I think the new generation doesn't really care. They want to follow their heart. They want to follow their passion. And as homes, as parents, as a community, we need to encourage our children to take that forward. And I don't think being an engineer is the end all and be all of it. I see that at my home. I see my kids who are so creative, making electronic music, coming up with albums. I think you just need to provide an environment where they can let go and discover themselves. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. And you were telling me on the phone that your son is combined music and engineering, right?
So he makes electronic music technology, and yeah, he wants to do engineering, and I love it. I think it's fabulous. These kids can discover these fabulous ideas. It's all creativity, isn't it? Thinking out of the box, and that's what you want to do. So yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Brian, you have lived and worked around the world. I have a very important question for you, because as in our education system here, the board exam is like a huge deal. It is like the be all and end all of people's lives. So what is your view on this assessment form, like standardized testing and board exams? Do you think that they are assessing the right skills?
Well, good day, and thank you very much for this opportunity to join in what I think is a very stimulating discussion. And I think it's, first of all, important to say how much I agree with the points all the previous speakers have made. Because at the heart of this, let's please remember, is the individual child. So the question of, for example, teacher training, absolutely critical, because if we don't get teacher training right, we're not going to improve the situation. But it begins with treating every single child as an individual. Now, interestingly, you opened by saying curiosity killed the cat. That was your experience. Very few people quote the other half of the adage, satisfaction brought it back. So I don't know how easy it is to satisfy a cat's curiosity, but I know it's pretty difficult to satisfy a child's curiosity, particularly at a young age. When it comes to assessment, well, let's just stand back for a moment. Because of COVID-19 around the world, for the first time, we've had to see exams abandoned, cancelled in so many countries, curtailed, shortened, and suddenly it's possible still for life to go on. Isn't that a surprise? Because before that, you would have believed the only thing that was important in your life at that age was to pass this next exam. If you think about it, nobody asks you as an adult, usually, what did you get for CBSE? They ask you what your last degree or qualification was. Oh, it's a master's, it's a PhD. So whatever the last thing is you've done, but we use these simply as markers. Now, they're useful merely as tools. Educators in schools often criticize the fact that what we're doing is driven by universities, because universities say, if you don't have this, you won't get into this course, or you won't be able to do that. So everybody stresses and pushes that that's the important thing. And clearly within the assessment regime, there are useful points to benchmark. You can't operate in life unless you have at the very least the foundation of skills in things like literacy and numeracy. So there's no point saying we can throw everything out, because there are foundational aspects that if you don't have them, you're going to prevent the person's creativity, not aid it. Now, for me, I passionately believe that art, music, drama, PE, sports do something different for a child's development, because these subjects open doors and provide opportunities that you don't get anywhere else. And I'll talk perhaps later about what we do in our schools to try and create opportunities for those kind of creative developments. But in terms of assessment, clearly our current assessment system is not working. And if nobody thinks that's true, just look at the fact that universities have had to admit people on the strength of teachers' own assessments, judgments, no exam being available. So that has proved it's burst that particular theory wide apart. And we have such good evidence, you've had it referred to already, about creativity. But also the other skill I always say to parents, it's absolutely critical for your child to have, is adaptability. Because whatever's going to happen in the future, the only thing we can guarantee is it's going to be different. So there's going to be a lot of change to contend with. So we need to build a child's confidence. One of the ways you do that is through the arts, because you give them the opportunity to see that they can succeed in any particular field. And that spills over into the areas they're not sure of, whether it's maths or language or social sciences. And that is what I've seen throughout my career. And you see it shown in the work of people like Carol Dweck, talking about positive mindsets, Daniel Goleman's emotional intelligence, Howard Gardner's multiple intelligences. These are all people leading in the field who have said to you, here are the different ways that we can reach the same point. And they don't have to be assessed in the way that they are. But you've seen a tremendous growth around the world in different forms of assessment. And it's as if that's acceptable up to a certain age. But once you get to the exam age, it's heads down, forget everything you've done in the past that was inquiry-based or creative in any shape or form, because unless you've memorized this stuff, you're not going to university. That has to change.
Thanks, Brian. That was really, really interesting, and I absolutely agree with you. All right, so Manit, my next question, I'm coming back to you. So it seems that there's this huge issue. We know our education system is out of date. But it's also hard to predict what kids of today will be doing, how, let alone what they're going to be doing in the future. We almost know that a large number of jobs and career paths that people have gone through the years are about to be taken away by some form of automation. What do you think are some of the changes educators and school owners need to be thinking about and planning to bring in? And just specifically also picking up from what Brian was talking about, the unique learning journey that we need to give each child.
Sure, Bharti. One of the things when we talk about creativity, and I spoke about flow a little bit, is that we never really allow the child the opportunity to experience that flow. And the big myth that needs to be broken is that children have a short attention span. It is true that kids can be distracted easily, but it is also equally true that kids can be immersed totally in doing a piece of art, writing something, making blocks for 4 hours uninterrupted. You let them go, they won't move. So, somewhere we need to get out of this tyranny of the timetable, this whole boxing their lives, that you start doing something, just when you start enjoying it, somebody else walks in. So making a more holistic context in which they have the space to experience whatever it is that they wish to experience in a particular uh, time and space. Yeah. So my kids in their early years went to this free progress school called Mirambika, and it was fascinating. They'll just go there, they'll do whatever they wanted to do. Sometimes they'd all start writing, and then they had 20 kids in the class, and four of them did not want to write, they would do something else. They were all on their own journeys. By grade 4, I was beginning to get a little concerned in terms of whether my child is academically picking up stuff or not. I thought it was getting too radical for me also. And when my older one was in grade 5, we moved to the US. And I was telling Smriti, my wife, that we should probably get him to repeat grade 4 because I'm pretty sure he's not going to fit in. And to my surprise, he was right at the top of his class. I don't even know how that happened. And that is the case with all Mirambika kids. Now, there are kids who moved to our school from his batch. His batch is the grade 12 batch now. That kid is topping our school. There's another one last year in Step by Step was topping that school across IB. And these kids, I'm talking about IB, so like phenomenally well, like they phenomenally well, IB, CBSE, everywhere. So just letting kids be is extremely important, particularly in the early years. The second thing I would say is provide a safe space, eliminate judgment, eliminate fear. These are easy things to do. Just needs a shift in mindset for teachers. Allow that space for every child to be themselves. Unless you allow that, creativity will not thrive. Third, I would say at a systemic level, we need to make a shift from learning standards to learning continuum. And this is an interesting shift. While we see the US system went absolutely crazy about the Common Core standards, the Australians, so the Common Core standards meant that this is the standard and every child needs to achieve this standard at this age, and if they don't, then they're not doing well. Now we all know one child can be making greater progress in one subject versus the other, and the Australians created a whole continuum. So you could be anywhere in a particular standard, you could be anywhere on the continuum, and it's fine so long as you're there. So that created a lot of more space for the curriculum to fit the child versus the child fitting the curriculum. Third thing I would say, fourth thing, I don't know, I've lost count, uh, is uh, teach the child, not the subject. Address the whole being of the child. mind, heart, body, engage them, whether it is through art or craft or music or solving a problem. Even in math, there can be art in everything, there can be science in everything. So address the child, not just the subject. Don't forget you're teaching a child. Yeah. Uh, Use tech if you wish to personalize the experience. A lot of content now can be managed through technology. Don't look at yourselves as technology, as content deliverers alone. So that role needs to change. Then create projects, themes, as Radhika shared. I think most progressive schools now in the country have taken that route, to create an integrated multidisciplinary context where the child is solving a real problem or is working in a context that is relevant for the child, where the answer to the question, why am I doing what I'm doing, is apparent to the child. Another thing is around collaboration. Make them work in groups. We need to build their capacity to relate. And we don't allow that space right now. And as somebody said, the most abundant and the most underutilized resource in a classroom is student thinking. We never let it surface. It's all about the teacher's thinking, and that is such a precious resource. And the moment we're going to talk about creativity, if we don't use that resource, if that stays dormant, then our children will not become active learners or creators. And at this point of time, gone are the days when the Fiat and Ambassador could do with changing the headlight design once every 15 years. Uh, the world is getting too personalized. It's just too much innovation. Everything gets obsolete every 6 months. We will need a lot of creativity, as one of you said. It's both a social and an economic imperative now.
Thanks, Manit. Thank you. So Rifka, what about you? I mean, similar question. If you were to suggest some new ideas, because I think a lot of our viewers want you guys to share some ideas on how do you create the right conditions and opportunities to develop CQ in children to equip them to face the future, and what are some of these things? What are some of the things educators should be thinking about?
Sure. Well, to begin with, art needs to be considered a core academic subject along with every other academic subject and have equal weightage. That's one thing that needs to change, I think, immediately in schools. Also, the A needs to be put back in STEM, so equal weightage again with science. Teachers working in cross-curricular STEAM settings often see their students making connections between concepts and solving problems in new and exciting ways. We're seeing children having a lot more aha moments when you put the art in STEM. So that's definitely something to think about. Art integrated learning as an approach has great potential to transform learning environments. It engages, it's experiential learning, it's flexible, it's enjoyable, it links between subjects and real life, it supports authentic experience, students are really motivated. We've seen great shifts in their psychological profiles. Our mentors have observed their creative expression has developed. With the freedom to create, children feel more confident and discover new ways of looking and thinking. So definitely art integrated learning is something we're looking at very closely. We've also talked about having, you have a biology lab or a chem lab. Why not have an art lab in your school? Create an environment where children can come and create freely, where they're equipped with the tools, the materials, the resources. Also, in having an art section, having a section focused on art in your library, and having books focused on, and also India has such a rich visual culture. We need to kind of bring Yeah.
Okay, we lost the last part, but I think I'll move on. Brian, my next question is to you. Since you've lived all over the world and experienced new approaches in different schools, in Hong Kong and other parts of the world, what are some of the things leaderships, should be thinking about and bringing into their classrooms to prepare students for the fourth industrial revolution?
Well, first and foremost, I'm fortunate in that in working for Nord Anglia Education, you have the capacity to draw on these various ideas from around the world. And I think it starts with what's already been mentioned. It starts with a child at an early age 3 or so, in terms of the use of play. We need to start educating parents that play is not a waste of time. It's actually critical for a child's development. And the curriculum that we deliver focuses on the child as an individual. So the teacher has to look at what is the child interested in and go with that interest. And everything that we design, whether it's play equipment or what's in the classroom, is connected to that. So you begin with that and you build that curiosity. And then that's enhanced by the fact that as a large company, we have collaborations with MIT, with the Juilliard School of New York, with UNICEF, and we have our own global campus. Now, each of those embodies these ideas that I'm talking about. So Global Campus, for example, links every child with every other child in all of our schools around the world. So you're talking about 70, 80,000 children, and you can be working with a child who's in school in Bratislava or Boston or Beijing. And it can be working on photography, on creative writing, on different projects. But what they enjoy about it is that global mindedness, that outward looking approach, which is another way of encouraging creativity. When it comes to Juilliard School of New York, then they train our teachers and they give opportunities in music, dance, and drama. And again, this is releasing the creative energy of the child. But I couldn't agree more with Radhika and others about how we harness that, because at the end of the day, creativity is a function of every single thing that we do. We just don't use it enough at the moment. Or, as you said at the beginning, we squash opportunities for it. We crush it out of a child as soon as we possibly can. So we have to be doing the opposite. And what I love about things like, we have a term like MIT challenge, and it is a STEAM challenge because it's always for us been including the arts. And when parents argue with me, why is it STEAM and not STEM? I just give the example of Apple. Why does anybody buy an Apple product? The technology is available at other providers. The reason they like Apple is they like the design. They like the look of it, the feel of it, the user-friendly nature of it. That's why. And as soon as you say that, they get the point about STEAM. But it's a pity you have to explain that to them in the first place, isn't it? Because they have lost their own sense of creativity and their own sense of understanding of the importance of it. So when we give these challenges, it's great to see how children rise to challenge. So one of the first ones with MIT was, what are you curious about? So we got 800 different ideas from 800 children in one school. And there were wonderful ideas like, why do we need space of any kind? What's it for? Does a dog have a soul? Now ask the average adult. I don't think they would give you these kind of notions at all, because we are the products of the sausage machine we've gone through, and we've ended up as the product that people wanted, to fit in, as we were saying earlier, with you should be doing a civil service exam, you should be becoming a doctor, you should be an accountant, you ought to do this. This is what everyone else is doing. This is what your granny did, so you ought to do the same. It's the kind of message that's constantly given. And the beauty of doing things like these challenges is you're not putting any number in the frame. And what I really like seeing was seeing those children with their 800 different ideas, then debating and discussing why I want this idea to be pursued. What does it give me? And they took a vote and they decided to concentrate on people who were looking at pollution. And we got 5-year-olds to take samples of water from where they live, bring it into school, and the 15-year-olds showed them how to do pH testing. When would you ever have that normally in a school? And that capacity to learn from each other was wonderful, but it's those sort of opportunities you have to give all of the time. And the way that you teach across school, whether it's play in the early years or the thematic project inquiry learning through primary, that's what helps harness it. But what you can't afford to do is lose that. That's why many schools have moved over to things like the IB, because the IB learner profile and the IB approach to learning, the approaches to teaching and learning in general, stand you in good stead. Because when you get to the IB diploma level, the expectation is you have developed these skills and can now apply them to the knowledge you've accrued. That's the difference. And that's why that opens doors again as a qualification for many children. And it still satisfies the need, dare I say it, of parents and universities and employers to see where this student is sitting. That, I think, is the prospect. So we can make these changes now. They are being made. They are happening around the world. Different people are trying different things. There are great possibilities.
Yep. I mean, those are some really, really great ideas. And I know Nord Anglia does amazing work. But, you know, what I kind of hear from a lot of school owners and principals is that, you know, they're often talking about things that are like mandated by the board, or that it's a very rigid curriculum and things like that. So Roshan, I kind of wanted to ask you this question. Do you think that schools have enough kind of freedom at the school level to bring about some of these changes, or are they restricted by, they have to follow the NEP or they have to follow the board or whatever?
It's a very valid question because, of course, all schools are operating within a political and policy environment, and they are therefore subject to certain constraints. And if schools went off and completely, you know, got a creativity only curriculum and said, let's forget about, you know, competitive exams and things, then in the current environment of board exams, parents will stop sending their kids to our school, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean that there isn't any space at all to do that, and to do at least some of that and to start moving in that direction. And I think, you know, we've been lamenting for years the fact that the boards have not recognized the need to somehow adapt themselves to stop putting this pressure on schools so that schools have the space to be creative. But I think if schools start showing the benefits of creativity and we have that movement from the bottom up, then we may have more chance of success of a shift at the board level. So there has been some positivity in the NEP, an indication that they want to shift the board slightly away from rote learning, but it remains to be seen what form that will take. But even without waiting for the boards, first of all, up to class 8, schools have quite a lot of freedom. And what you do in classes 1 to 8 is unlikely to seriously affect that much the performance in the boards, provided that the core learning happens in classes 1 to 8. So how you go about the learning in up to class 8 can evolve really quite easily, and there's, I don't feel that schools have the, you know, should use it as an excuse not to change that the board exams are in a particular way. Even now, even in the past few months, you know, I can speak for our school, where we found that because we've switched to online learning, back-to-back continuous online lessons are not practical, so we can't just mirror the school timetable 100%, and we needed to therefore impart learning asynchronously, and yet we wanted to cover the same syllabus, and so we found creative ways to cover the same syllabus content, but in other ways, which involved project-based learning by the kids, right? So suddenly this pushed us to introduce project-based learning, not in place of imparting the curriculum, but actually in order to impart the curriculum in less time. So the realization hit us that that is possible, right? So these are the beginnings of a culture change, and there should be no reason why that can't continue and happen even more and more. At the senior board exam level, sort of grades 9 to 12, the constraints are perhaps perceived as harder, and schools unfortunately are inherently operating in a competitive environment, and the schools which are able to get 98.4% instead of 98.3% are going to attract more admissions. That's the sad state of affairs. So it will be a hard culture shift to bring teachers and parents along to try to change that curriculum right now to be much more creativity based, and that's a real sad problem. But I think let us still try what we can without jeopardizing the results. And as I said, there should be ways of introducing creativity that actually not only don't jeopardize curriculum impartation, but actually enhance it. Secondly, if we do this from the ground up through the grassroots up to class 8, I think the culture shift will follow, the benefits will be perceived. No kid is going to want to study a particular way up to class 8 and then suddenly change their whole way of studying when they go into class 9. Teachers are going to see the problem in that, and boards are going to see the problem in that. And there'll be an understanding in the education sector of how we can examine in a much different way and in a more creativity-oriented way. And third, I think there is hope in the way that the NEP has described the changes required and the culture shift that is slowly but surely happening. So I think we should not be deterred by the environment of board exams. And I think we should still be making every effort to move towards creativity.
Great. Thank you.
I just want to add something on that, because that's a very common issue, concern that people raise. So I read this study where, they said 7 out of 8 people who've been told that they'll get a heart attack if they don't start eating right and exercise, don't do it. So this is more that kind of a situation where people are saying, no, I've got too much work. I don't have time to exercise and I'm traveling too much. I have to eat bad food. And really, if there is a will, there is plenty of latitude with CBSE and all other boards to make whatever change you want to make, particularly at the elementary level.
Yeah. So Anita, we must come back to you, and I want to kind of hear from you what opportunities you got in your school days to discover your passion. And if you were starting anew, what opportunities would you want to give kids to enable them to have this divergent, non-conformist, original thinking mindset?
Okay. It's not necessary that I'm going to answer your question, but I've been thinking about the whole discussion, and I want to put in some points towards, that. So I hope you don't mind. See, the thing is that even now, when we are talking about creativity, and in today, we're still thinking of art and culture in terms of a lab where painting, sculpture, but maybe photography is art, right? That kind of art. But within the art community, art has now expanded its borders to an extent where many things are art. For example, cooking is art, okay? And I would like educators to think along these lines, that when they want children to not only bond, come together, form communities, culture can involve classes where they learn how to, cook or chop things, so that gender sensitivity also comes in that process, where they learn to do things which they, maybe their families don't, they're kept away from the kitchen for various reasons. So many things like that. For example, cooking, and secondly, something like gardening. I think, we must think of culture in broader ways in terms of its integration within the education system. For example, for me, what is very interesting is that the word agri has culture in it. So agriculture is a fascinating thing. Like, where does culture come with? So, let's think in ahead to involve culture as a very broad-based thing, one. And also we need to balance, see, everything, if it's ocular, if it's, it's about the gaze, like everything is about the eyes, but
Yes.
we have to think, even for the future, as to how our haptic, how our other senses would be involved within education for the health of a human being. Because what I find is in the whole system that there is there's an absolute, like, it's been tick marked. Yeah, that's great. What? Physical health. So sports, which is also a very creative thing, when you play any sport, it's a very, very creative thing, but it's all about physical and mental, but basically it's about the body. But culture and art basically is a lot, it's mental, it's mind, the health of the mind. I mean, if you're imaginative, that means your mind is healthy. And actually, our culture does not prioritize mental health or imaginative mind over the physically healthy body. So these are things within the education system we need to kind of really, rethink as to how we want to be creative with children. Yeah. Now we can get back to your question, but if you can ask it again, I've lost track. Yeah.
I think that's a really good insight, which all of it's nice to get an outsider's perspective as well.
Yeah.
I'm going to actually have to move on to the last question.
That's fine.
All of our, which is to the whole panel. It's kind of going back to the earlier question that both Roshan and Manit had talked about. Is that so? Today we've heard a lot about all these new approaches that we must implement. But when talking to school principals and promoters and owners, as to what's stopping them from making these changes, they say that we have to follow the CBSE, the ICSE, or they say the parents won't kind of accept our new approaches. But there's a lot school owners and principals can do that's not mandated by the board, and they have to be brave enough to persuade their parents that this is the new way forward. But many school leaders and even the top ones are not taking these risks. And I kind of want to get last comments on why this is not happening, because they have the resources and they can do this. Manit has to leave, so why don't you start, Manit?
I think we're just being lazy. It does take a lot of effort. I think also, no, I'm being a little unfair. It does take a lot of effort. It does take a lot of skill also at some level, and it's not like the skill can't be developed. But attitudinally, we all need to make that shift. First, we need to start believing that this is a social and an economic imperative. Things need to change. If we don't bring in that creativity, our kids are going to suffer. We're not serving them with the education that we're providing. And yeah, it is going to be difficult for low cost budget private schools to make that shift, but for many of the other schools that are probably in the 50,000 plus range, it is more a matter of committing ourselves to it, and committing ourselves also to learning from other institutions where it is happening. In our case, that journey began with institutions like Mirambika, like the Krishnamurti schools, and many of these schools don't have a lot of resources, and they were still being able to do some incredible stuff. So, yeah. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry. I need to step into another meeting. Wonderful talking to all of you, and thank you to the audience for listening.
Okay, so the rest of the panel, please feel free to come in whenever you want. This is an open round. But what's stopping people like yourselves from bringing about some of these changes, if not more?
I can go quickly, and I think I feel that as educators, as institutions, it really doesn't stop us. And if there is a will, there is a way. And the most important thing for us is to involve the parents. You need to educate parents as well. So it's not just about educating the children. You have to build a community. So at least at TSRS, we try to build a community. Our parents are always part of what we do. We have these crazy events called Mad About Heritage, Mad About Environment, Mad About Science, Mad About Maths, and they are all driven by the parents. They are the educators. So we provide them with the boundaries, we provide them with what needs to be done. And these parents go crazy and they just love it because they are partners in the journey of their child. And that is very, very important. Going forward, we have to build communities, we have to pull parents in to let them know that this is the way. It's like you have to also work on their mindset, and I'm glad a lot of schools are doing that. I know abroad it has always been where parents came to school, it was a community building, and it's going to happen in India soon too. They have to involve the parents and get their buy-in, and that will only happen when you have an open door policy, when schools are open to parents to be part of that very important journey that your kids are going to take. So that would be from me.
Anyone else?
Yeah, sure, Bharti. Yeah, from our working with schools, definitely we have open meetings with parents and kind of share all our information and knowledge and process with them and bring them on board. I think echoing what Radhika was saying, it's like making them part of the community of learning for children and for in the school is really, really important. And letting them know that they have a very, very important role in making it a successful experience for their child. So that is really key. Also, one thing we would emphasize is empowering educators. Educators and art educators especially are kind of teachers, I think, are our unsung heroes. They need to be given their place in the school and also be given the tools, knowledge, and resources to do their work. So that is something I would say is really, really key to look at that. And how do we do that? A lot of teachers are overburdened or are playing multiple roles within an ecosystem. So I think there's a huge opportunity there for the role that teachers play in our schools along with parents.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think I'm going to take some questions from the audience now. I just like one or two because we're way over time. So there's a question for Mr. Gandhi. I agree that the education system is kind of killing inherent creativity. However, the conversation has only been about developing creative imagination, even in the NEP. What are few classroom strategies that would help children to stay creative? And do you have any resource in this direction to share?
So really interesting question. And I think we should, share resources and things after this, and a number of teachers and people with much more classroom experience than myself might be able to share more strategies on that. But I think, to address your wider question, to foster the creativity in children, I think a very important step is also to foster creativity in teachers. So, rather than me or any so-called expert or any person on a panel prescribing classroom strategies for creativity in an uncreative way, we want that teachers should creatively come up with classroom strategies. And that is the best way in turn to foster creativity in the classroom. So what schools need to do increasingly is give teachers the space and the environment and the support to learn creative techniques in their classrooms. And I think if they do that, that's the first step on a culture change towards a classroom culture of creativity. So first, teachers need to understand how to be creative themselves, which schools can do by giving them the time and space and support to do that through action research, through trying out new techniques, while trying out new techniques, having someone like a coaching figure coming and modeling better practice in their class or discussing ideas with them. Teachers engaging in collaborative communities like professional learning communities of discussion and sharing of good practice and supporting each other to enhance classroom practice. So through all these methods, we can boost the creativity of teachers, and then teachers can creatively come up with practices in the classroom to foster creativity among students in turn.
Okay, thank you thank you for answering that question. I think I'm gonna have to wrap up because it's 5:19 and this was supposed to go until 5 o'clock. And I know all our panelists have appointments after this. But just to kind of summarize a little bit, I've learned, all of us, I can speak for the audience as well, we've learned so much about, how important empathy is, from Anita about how important it is to, follow your passion and love what you do. So much from Brian about what's happening around the world and play. From Radhika about what happens at the Sri Ram School, and of course from Roshan and about City Montessori and the technology world, and Rivka about art integrated learning, which I think is an amazing new educational approach. So I want to thank you, all the expert panelists, Radhika, Brian, Roshan, Rivka, and Anita for being here, and Manit, of course. Please do continue this conversation. And I have a Facebook group called The Good Teacher. So, audience members, attendees, please post your comments there. And thank you very much for being here. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Bharti, for having us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Namaste.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Stay safe.